Hey guys, it's me cyoubx, and today we're going to mod the ShengShou 4x4 version 4. This is going to be an adaptation of the Konsta and Florian mods, but I'm going to be doing them a little bit differently to suit this cube so that it doesn't turn out as loose as some people have been saying. As a disclaimer, in no way am I responsible for how your cube turns out. Even though the mod works for me, that's not to say that it will work for everyone. Primarily, if you over mod your cube, there's a very high risk that your cube will become very, very loose and unusable. So you just have to be careful when you use this tutorial to not over mod, and as a general rule of thumb, it's always better to mod less and then to go back and then mod some more than the other way around where you mod too much and then end up with a cube that you can't really use. So just be careful when you use this tutorial. It's just a guide, and in no way am I saying that this has a 100% success rate. You really do have to be careful. So before we begin modding, you want to make sure you have the appropriate tools for the job. The mod for the ShengShou 4x4 version 4 is nice because you actually don't need that many materials. In fact, you can do the whole thing with just sandpaper. Here I have 150 grit sandpaper, and this is the only sandpaper I will be using. I won't have anything rougher or finer to polish the pieces because, for instance, the Konsta Mod only deals with the internal pieces, and there's no point in making it pretty. It'll just smooth itself out over time as you break it in after the mod. Some optional tools. Here, this is a nail file. This nail file is really nice because it's flexible, so when you start rounding the pieces, something flexible like this is going to make it a lot easier for you. Lastly, right here, this is a rotary tool. A lot of people call them Dremels. Dremel is just a brand of a rotary tool. And at the end we have a sanding bit. This is really not required, and in most cases I would recommend against using this because for the pieces that you're going to be modding on the 4x4, they're very, very fine and very tiny pieces. So there's a high risk of over modding, as I said before, if you use something like a rotary tool. And if you over mod, you can't go back and undo it. So it's always better, even though it might take longer, to use something like sandpaper and slowly sand the pieces until you get it just right. In all, if you only have sandpaper, that's okay. You can do the entire mod with only sandpaper or only a nail file. If you don't have a rotary tool, that's totally fine. But if you only have a rotary tool and you don't have sandpaper for some reason, I would recommend getting sandpaper because, especially for the Konsta mod, you're going to want to use this and not this. Aside from this, you might also want to get a respirator. The last thing you want is to get hurt or get sick from modding a Rubik's Cube, so make sure you stay safe, keep your lungs clean. If you don't have a respirator, then make sure you either do this outside or in a really well ventilated room. I'm going to be doing the mod indoors, but the air circulation is pretty good, so I should be fine. But stay safe and make the right choices. Now that we have the materials out of the way, we want to first disassemble the cube, and then we want to sort all the pieces into appropriate piles to stay organized. The easiest way to disassemble one of these cubes is to actually disassemble it like a guhong, because that's basically what this is. So you want to turn the top layer 45 degrees, and then these two edge pieces are basically joined together, and so this whole thing is like one guhong edge piece, so you can pry that out. As a side note, this edge piece actually looks exactly like a guhong. You can see on the side you have the two tabs that extend out. From this angle you can see how it rounds together, and this is basically a guhong mechanism. It's really not that special, but that's just an aside. So after those pieces are taken out, the rest of the cube disassembles pretty easily. You can first pop out a corner, and then the whole thing kind of just falls apart. So after you get this done, do one of these, and the whole cube is now disassembled. Now that the cube is disassembled, you want to assort the pieces into piles. You can get cups or containers to put things in, or you can just sort them on the table. The core you're not going to be modding. There are two joined inner pieces here that you could mod, but I didn't before on the previous two times that I've done this mod, and I didn't see a difference. So I'm not going to be modding these two parts, but you certainly can if you want, but I won't. So I'm going to put this aside, and then I'm going to sort the rest of the pieces into their piles. In the background you can see 4 piles: edge pieces, center pieces, internal pieces, and corner pieces. But of course this is completely optional. You could just put all 4 piles together into one big thing and it wouldn't really matter. This is just for organizational purposes. Now that the piles are sorted and we have all our materials, we can start the mods. I'm going to be starting with the Konsta Mod since it's relatively easy and it's probably the more important one of the two. For the Konsta Mod, you see I have the pile of internal pieces right here, and I also have some sandpaper. Again, this is 150 grit, and this will be the only thing you need for the Konsta Mod. You're going to be modding two pieces, both of which are the internal pieces, and they look like this in case you aren't sure. So this is the big internal piece, and for the Konsta Mod on this, you're going to want to round off the corners right here. So the four big corners. You're also going to want to round off the edge right here and right here. And again, there's going to be 4 of these on each piece. So there are 8 points that you want to mod on each of the large internal pieces. For the small internal pieces, you're going to do something similar. You want to mod the 4 corners. You're going to want to mod right here, here, and here. You also want to round off this edge right here and this edge on the other side. So there's going to be 6 contact points that you want to round off in the small internal piece. So the mod isn't too difficult for these bigger, larger parts. What you want to do is you want to take your sandpaper, lay it on a hard surface, so obviously I'm on a desk, and you want to mod the 4 corners, and the easiest way to do that is by taking the corner, putting it on the sandpaper, and then doing one of these. You want to position the corner on the sandpaper, and then you want to roll the piece back and forth in a somewhat circular motion so that you can round off the corners. You don't want to shave it off straight because that'll make the cube too loose, so you want to round off just enough so that the 2 pieces can have a smooth entry, and so I'm going to do that right now, and then I'll show you the result. Okay, so that did not take long at all, and you can see that the corner is now gone, and this is sufficient for the Konsta Mod. You don't have to mod any more than this because remember, you're going to be modding the small internal pieces as well, and together with this, that's going to be smooth enough for the 2 pieces to slide across each other. So now that you've done this, you want to do it on the other 3 corners, and that seems to be good. So you can see now it's still a very rectangular piece, but the corners have been rounded off. I'll hold the sandpaper in the background so that you can see the contrast a bit better. Yeah, so you can see it doesn't look perfect, and the thing is, it doesn't have to because this is going to be inside the cube and no one's going to see how imperfect your pieces are. You just want to make sure that the corners are rounded enough so that the cube can function with those internal slices. So this is perfectly fine, and you want to make sure you do this with the rest of the big pieces. For a comparison, this is what the piece looks like now. You can see that it's rounded off, and then whereas here it's very rectangular. Notice that the width and the height of the piece has been maintained. I didn't actually shave off the very ends. If you start sanding off the edges of the pieces right here, your cube's going to become too loose. It's not going to be stable enough. So you want to make sure you only round off the corners, and it looks something like this. It does not have to look perfect because this is going to be inside your cube and no one's going to see the imperfections. You just want to make sure that it's functional, and this will do just fine. Next, you want to sand off this part right here, this edge, because that's going to also catch with the small internal piece. So you want to take a nail file, and if you don't have a nail file, you can just take your sandpaper as well, and you just want to file off this at a somewhat 45-degree angle. Make sure you sand very little because this is actually somewhat optional. I just like to do it because whenever you see a sharp edge, you tend to want to mod it. So just take your nail file and run it over. And just doing that is actually enough. You can barely see it, but you can see how there's like a matte bevel now, whereas it was glossy before. So you want to do that on all 4 of the edges of each of the big internal pieces. So we now have a completed big internal piece for the Konsta Mod. You want to do this with the remaining pieces, and then you can move on to the small internal pieces. For the small pieces, you want to do exactly the same thing as what you did for the big piece. You see the 4 corners here, you just want to sand those down, round them off very little. In fact, this is fairly optional because if you've done it for the big piece, then that should be enough for smooth entry, but you want to sand off just a little bit. If you sand off too much, again, the cube is going to become unstable, so you want to be very careful with this. After that's done, you also want to bevel this edge right here and this one right here, and that will just provide a smoother entry for the internal pieces. So this is what it looks like. You can see it does not look pretty at all. In fact, it looks fairly mangled. So here we have an angled off corner, same with here, and then this is just rounded off a little bit. This whole thing took like 20 seconds. So now you want to flip it around, and then you want to either fold up some sandpaper or get a nail file, and you want to sand off a little bit on this edge and the opposite side. Note that this is actually optional. You do not have to do these 2, so if you find it very difficult, do not worry. You can skip it because on the big piece, since you've already modded this part and this part, that'll be sufficient. So you don't actually have to do these if this is too difficult for the materials that you have. So that is the Konsta mod. You want to make sure you do the mods on both the big pieces and the small pieces on the remaining ones. And as for the core, as I mentioned before, you do not have to mod the two pieces that are fused with the core, but you can if you want. I would recommend against it since it's kind of finicky and it's also unnecessary. So I finished the Konsta mod and I assembled the cube. I did not lube it and I haven't done the Florian mod yet. This is just to show you how effective the Konsta mod is. If you watched my review, you know how these inner slices did not turn at all. After the Konsta mod, and I haven't even broken this cube in really, and no lube, you can see the inner slices turn fine. No catching, it's very smooth, it feels just like the outer layers, and it just makes this cube a whole lot better. In fact, the Konsta mod is so effective for this particular cube that the Florian mod is kind of unnecessary since it corner cuts so well. But I am going to do the Florian mod now and I'll walk you through it, and this cube should come out to be a really amazing beast. So now that I have the cube disassembled again, we're going to do the Florian mod. You're going to be looking at 3 pieces for this mod, and they're all going to be the outer pieces. So you're going to look at the corner piece, and for the corner piece, all you want to do is you want to shave off this lip. And right now you can see how it kind of looks like a guhong. You just want to shave that off. Something optional you can do is right here, you can see how there's a ridge. You can sand that off so that it's nice and smooth as well. I didn't do that the last 2 times I did this mod and my cubes turned out fine, so I don't know how necessary that is, but this lip you definitely want to get rid of, so do that if nothing else. For the edge piece, you basically want to round this off, and then you also want to shave along this edge so that everything is just rounder along this ridge. And you want to do it on this side as well, obviously. You don't have to mod here or here since the inner layers by now are pretty good and the corner cutting is decent, so you don't have to mod that, but you want to mod the outer sides of the edges, so here and here. For the centerpiece, you just want to mod this ridge. You want to round it off. You might be able to see a little bit of flash right there on the centerpiece. That should be sort of a guide. You basically want to round and curve the centerpiece, but you don't want to exactly completely sand off this piece of flash, because if this flash disappears, that means you've thinned the plastic too much and this piece might actually pop. And I think that's what a lot of people are having trouble with when they say that their cube becomes too loose. It's because you're over modding this bit. So basically for all the mods, you want to round stuff off, but you also want to keep the structural integrity of the cube. So for instance, on the corner piece, we are sanding off this lip, but notice we're not rounding off this inner part, and we're also not shaving down plastic on the side. This way, when we assemble the cube, this is still going to be very stable. Sanding this part isn't going to affect the stability of the puzzle. But on the centerpiece, if you round too much and you thin out this stem, then this cube could either snap or just fall apart. So this is what I mean by not over modding. You want to be very careful when you do these things, and again, it's always better to do too little and go back than to do too much and then have to buy a new cube. So that's just a general rule of thumb, and this is a good guide. As far as actually how to use sandpaper on sanding these things, you can be pretty creative on how you want to do it. You basically just take either a rotary tool or sandpaper and you just shave this part off so that it's flush with the rest of the edge, and that's really all you have to do. Again, you can make sure that this base is also smooth, but I will not be doing that. For the edge piece, I find the Dremel or rotary tool to be the easiest. You could do it with sandpaper and it would look a lot nicer, especially if you've never used a rotary tool before. This is not a mod that you want to try it on. I would only use a Dremel if you're actually somewhat experienced with modding puzzles. And lastly, for the centerpiece, this is kind of tricky to mod, but the procedure, I think it's probably easiest with sandpaper. And all you have to do is you hold this piece with your thumb on the sticker, and then you put your pointer finger right here where the plastic is exposed, and what you're going to do is you're going to run it over the sandpaper in a somewhat circular motion, or sort of an arc. So to show you, you want to place it down like this, and then if you just move your hand back and forth like this, that will obviously round the piece. Like I said before though, you want to make sure you don't completely sand off this bump or this flashes, basically, since that's what's keeping the puzzle together. So you just want to round off mostly this corner right here, and make sure that's nice and round. I'm back from modding the 3 pieces that I showed you before, and I ended up using sandpaper for all 3 pieces because it was just more convenient, and I think it turned out better. For the corner, you can see how this is completely flush now. It might be angled a little bit, but for the purpose of this mod, I think it's good enough. And yeah, so you can see how it's much more of a cubicle shape now instead of a guhong. And again, I did not mod the base of the corner, so if you would like to do that, you certainly can, but I'm not going to. The centerpiece, you can see how there's still that little bit of flash there. I used that as a guide to make sure I didn't over mod, but you can also see from this profile how the corner is now gone. It's much more beveled, and then from this angle you can also see how it's much more circular, whereas before it was more jagged. And finally, for the edge piece, you can see how from this angle it actually curves upward a little bit, and then from this angle the corner is again shaved off, and then it tapers off along here. So here obviously I sanded more, and then I tapered it down to here where I only sanded a little bit, since this is where most of the catching occurs for the outer layers, so I modded this the most, and I think the piece looks quite nice. For comparison's sake, here is the unmodded corner and here's the modded one. You can see this lip here that is gone from there, so from the side. Here are 2 edge pieces. Obviously this one's the modded one, and you can see how it's just rounded off along this edge. And then from the profile, like that, you can see how the one on the right has a missing corner at the bottom. And then for the center, you can see how this one, which is unmodded, is very flat on the left, and then it curves down near the bottom, whereas on this one it is just one big arc. I have all the pieces laid out in front of me now because I have finished the Konsta Florian mod, and now we're going to assemble the cube, and we're also going to lube it. The first thing though is, before we even assemble, we want to lube the core, because before I modded it I never lubed this cube and the core is very stiff. So to do this, we're going to do it the lazy way by using shock oil. Now shock oil is good because it's very watery, and if you just lube around the screw, it's just going to seep in through the entire stem, and that's going to solve our issues. If you want, you can unscrew it and use cyoubx or some sort of differential oil. However, I don't like unscrewing ShengShou products because their screws are pretty soft, and there's a high chance of actually stripping either the screw head or the screw itself, or cracking the core. So to be safe, I'm just going to use shock oil and dribble some down around the screw, and that's going to seep through. Now that the core is lubed, we can begin assembly, and I will walk you through the easiest way to do it. I found it easiest to first find the piece that has the 2 fused inner pieces, so that's this one. And you're going to want one big inner piece and one small one, and what you're going to do is, you can see this tab right here. You want to put the small one in there, like so, and now if you rotate it, you see how this one's fused and this one is snapped in, so it's very easy to just put in the big one like this. Okay, so now that you have this in, you also want to do a side that's adjacent to it, so take another small inner piece and snap it in there. Like so. And now you want to take a big inner piece like this and slide it in, and now you have the core partially done like this. Turn this around so that's at the bottom, and now you want to start assembling with this. This is a centerpiece. You drop it in and you just let it hang there and let gravity help you. So now you take an edge piece, put it next to it, take another edge piece, put it next to that, take a corner, oops, drop it in, and you can rest this on the table just like that. So now you want to take another centerpiece and put it there. Take another centerpiece, put it right there. Take an edge piece, drop it there. And now you want to fill this part of the core, so take a big inner piece and you can just rest that in there. Take a small inner piece, slide it next to the big one, repeat on the other side, and now you have an eighth of the cube assembled. So what you want to do next is you want to build the core up again. So build here or here, it doesn't matter, and you keep doing that until you only have one edge left, and I will come back when that is done. Okay, so as you can see here, I have most of the cube assembled. I only have this last two parts left, and this is pretty good if you've never lubed your cube before, because I'm going to be using differential oil, and this stuff is very sticky, so it's going to work as a semi-adhesive to make sure the pieces stay in place. But the procedure is pretty easy. You want to make sure that you don't assemble this last inner core part. Instead, you want to start filling the sides. So I'm going to take a centerpiece and put them on both sides like this, and then we want to close this off with the edge pieces. So just go like that, and then two more edge pieces there. Like this. And here, of course, we have the two centers. So we can just drop that in. And at this point, you can do a couple things. The first is you have this hole down here. I know this is a black cube, so it's hard to see, but this hole is obviously for the small inner piece. And you can just drop that in and it's going to be secured. And from here, you actually want to turn the cube 45 degrees. That's going to lock that inner piece in place so that it's not going to fall out. And now you just want to take your two corners, slide them in. For this last corner, take your differential oil and you're just going to put some right here. Not a lot at all, if you can see that, and you just want to put it up against the edge piece. So that's going to stick these two together. As you can see, they move around. And now you want to put some lube on the top of the core, just like this. And now, if you take your centerpiece, lube the underside of it. And now you want to attach it to the lube that's on the core. This other one you don't have to lube. Just slide it in. Like so. And you can see how that's stuck down. So now what you want to do is take your small inner piece, the last one. You want to lube the top of it so that it can stick in the hole that you just created with the centerpieces. And obviously this also helps lube the internal mechanism. I accidentally dropped the piece in there, but it should just snap in like this and it'll stay there because of the lube. I did take the corners out. You can put that back in like so. And now you have this edge left, and this is where people have the most trouble. You have one big inner piece left and two edge pieces. First of all, lube the inside of one of the edge pieces, just like that, and then also lube another side of the corner, so right here. And just everywhere else inside the cube. The lube will work its way through, and don't worry about over lubing. But anyway, now you have your centerpiece, or your edge piece rather. Take your inner piece and you want to put it right there, like this. Take your other edge piece, create a sandwich, and this now looks pretty much like a guhong piece. This is at 45 degrees. You put the whole sandwich in, snap it in like you would a 3x3. And now you have an assembled ShengShou 4x4 version 4. But you're not quite done yet. What we want to do next is take shock oil. And you've created these nice little holes. Take some shock oil, dribble a ton in. I mean, I'm squeezing the bottle, and turn it around. And now do another side, just like that. And now you want to work everything in and see how it turns. So now that the mod is done, a couple notes. The first thing you might notice is that the cube feels a lot looser, especially after you break in the lube. It'll feel very loose. You'll just want to tighten it some more and it should feel better. The other thing is you might want to change the stickers. I'll be putting the Cube Specialist stickers on this, although it won't be shown in the video. And the last note is you're going to want to break this in as if it's a new cube. After you sand it, some of the edges become jagged and it just takes time to break in, and then those minor catches will disappear and then your cube should be pretty good. I will have a solve video with this cube after I resticker it and everything else, but that'll be a separate video. As far as this tutorial goes, this does conclude the tutorial on how I make my ShengShou 4x4s awesome. And if this video helped you at all, make sure to give it a thumbs up. It helps me more than you might think. And if you have any more tutorials that you would like me to do, leave a comment and I will see if I can do it. Until next time, toodles.